Across the many years that I was a teacher, I saw a pattern amongst several students, and it was basically that when the work became difficult, they would shut down. Now, I'm not referring to students who, let's say, were incapable, and it's not that they couldn't do anything. In fact, it's the opposite. They probably were very, very capable, but they had learned something. They had learned that if I resist long enough, or if I complain very loudly, I become very emotional and almost impossible to work with. Well, then I can avoid this long enough, and then even eventually, someone, hopefully the adult, the parent, the teacher, would lower the expectation or lower the standard. And this is a major problem. Basically, what they've done is they've taken shutting down and turned it into a strategy to avoid challenges. And the reason why this is such a big issue is because it's not that they're trying to be mean about it or terrible about it, but they have basically learned through many attempts that if I just push back, eventually the adult backs off and eventually the standard is lowered or the work disappears. The problem is that if we don't help students work through difficult challenges or difficult situations, they will never become stronger. They become stronger by learning to work through the challenge with support, structure, and accountability. Now, I want to be fair. For some students, when they shut down, it is a real thing and it has to be dealt with in a serious way. But there are times where they don't have the foundational academic skills to really do the work. And so, yeah, they'll shut down then because, in a sense, they don't have the skills for it. And it's also possible that the task simply is overwhelming. It's just too much for the child at that time. And even from there, sometimes they just need better instructions and better support through that. So I want to say, yeah, that is a real thing, but that's not what I'm referring to in this situation. So when I say that some students shut down and then they use that as a strategy to avoid challenges and work, what I mean by that is this. They've just kind of learned that, if I just start crying or if I start screaming back and becoming emotional and I just become such a nuisance to work with, eventually they'll just kind of back off from me and then I don't have to do the work. Or, they back off and then they make the work a little bit simpler to my liking. That's a real strategy that some students have learned. And once a student has learned that that works for them, let's be honest, they have almost no reason to change that behavior. Compassion without expectations is really training the child to do avoidance. And if avoidance keeps working for them and keeps growing for them, they'll just keep doing it more. Now, I had a student many years ago, and she did almost everything she could to avoid work that was challenging for her. And as it turned out, much of the work was challenging for her. And it wasn't just within the classroom, it was also at home. And so, what she would do at home is she would basically complain and almost like yell and scream to kind of get her way. And she had learned that this strategy works, especially on her parents. And so, because it worked, she would use this strategy over and over and over again. She would avoid any challenges, avoid any difficult work, and her parents kind of gave in to her behavior essentially. So the way I had to deal with it in my classroom was I had to just make sure I was very consistent with my expectations but also my consequences. Now I'm not saying I was being cruel or mean or I was shouting or angry at her. In fact, it was the opposite. I tried to stay as calm as possible. But for a few examples, if she didn't complete the work earlier in the day, let's say later in the day when the rest of the class was moving on to their art projects, well, she didn't get to. She had to finish her work from earlier in the day. And the expectation is this work matters more than your art project. Another example would be if she didn't finish her homework, if the class was doing an activity all together, well, now basically, she didn't get to participate in the activity. She had to finish the homework first. That was the expectation placed on her. And it wasn't just one time, it was day after day after day after day after day for a whole year, holding that expectation consistently. And now, look, to her credit, she did improve a bit in the classroom. So keeping that consistently, she kind of understood that the strategies that were working for her at home, they weren't going to work for her in the classroom. Now, a little bit later on, I had a talk with her parents about this, and I asked them, are these the same things you see at home? And they said, oh yeah, we've seen this for years and years and years. And they're like, we don't really know who to reach out to. And I have a lot of empathy for them, but I asked them, well, what have you tried and what have you done? And they said, well, basically, we just kind of give in so that she stops complaining or stops having her tantrum. And I remember asking them this question. I said, but you're the parent. You're kind of supposed to hold the standard and the expectation. And I said, if not you, then who? Like, who would you expect to change her behavior if not you, the parents? And look, I get it. I'm sure as parents, no one ever wants to hear that. And it wasn't easy asking that question, but there is a truth to it because even though teachers carry a lot of importance in a student's life, in a child's life, and same with coaches, same with tutors, but the truth is, none of them ever carry the amount of authority and influence that parents do. So even though within a classroom, I could carry the expectation of, hey, this is how you're going to behave in the classroom, and here's how I will follow through with it. Just because you get upset, the work will not disappear. Just because you don't like doing it doesn't mean the work is going to vanish this moment. And you can get upset all you want, but the expectation remains. I can keep that in the classroom, but it works much better when that same message comes from home as well. And by holding that expectation, what we communicate to the child is, you can do hard things. We can break it down for you, but you can do it. If we, however, give in to their tantrums and their shutting down behavior, if they learn that avoidance works, what we're really teaching them is that, well, hard work or even challenging things, it's actually optional. So children will always need support, but they also need adults who mean the things that they say. So there was another student in my classroom from many years ago, and this boy in the classroom, basically, he wasn't trying his best with all his work, and I want to say it was back to school night, and basically his parents came up to me kind of concerned. They said, we know he's not really trying his best. Like, you don't have to tell us right now that he's kind of working below expectations. And all that was true. I asked them to describe like what happens when he gets home and all that. And they basically said, he'll get home, he'll immediately start playing video games, and then he'll eventually get to the work that he was assigned, but not really focused on it or trying his best on it. Now, I remember asking that student at the time, I said, hey, do you like video games? Now, his obvious answer was yes, he does like video games. And I said, great. But then I asked the follow-up question, which was, but do video games make you happy? And he said no. That basically it was a way for him just to avoid boredom, essentially. And I was actually really, I don't want to say shocked by his answer, but I'm glad he kind of understood that. I was pointing out his friends to him that were in the classroom, and his friends were doing well in school. They were quite happy. They were taking on challenges and overcoming them and accomplishing them. And I pointed that out to him. I said, look at your friends in the classroom. The reason why they're much happier than you is because they've actually kind of earned that confidence where they've overcome a challenge, they've taken on difficult tasks, and they've followed through with it. And I said, in order for you to be as happy as them, you have to challenge yourself more. You got to push yourself more. And to the student's credit and to his family's credit, they really took that on. And for the rest of the year, he took on more challenges. He took on difficult tasks and assignments, and he did really push himself. He grew a lot, and yeah, he was much happier, had a great sense of humor too. And I think that's this reminder that in order to gain that confidence, you have to push yourself through something. So this is something that all adults, parents, teachers need to understand that confidence, it doesn't come before the challenge. Like confidence comes after completing challenges and completing difficult tasks. And that's kind of how you prove yourself. You prove that, I can struggle with something, but I can keep going. I can stay committed. I can work hard. I can finish this. And when I do struggle with it, I will find a way to overcome it. I can do something hard. If we remove every hard thing or difficult task for a student, we don't protect their confidence. We end up weakening it. We have to kind of work them through, because if they don't ever have the opportunity to do something challenging, they'll never gain the evidence that they can actually do that they can handle something that is difficult. Now, I'm not saying we should overwhelm the student to the point of crying, or that we should basically ignore their frustrations in these difficult times, and also that we should just try to create a power struggle just to prove that we know what we're talking about. The goal is not about feeling overwhelmed or frustrated. It's if you do get frustrated, here's what we're going to do next. It's because students don't become resilient by avoiding difficulty. They become resilient by learning how to work through it. So let's add an important distinction here. Support is not the same thing as rescue. And support is basically saying to a child, we're going to work on this task. It may be challenging, but I will show you step by step how to handle it. Now, rescue says, I'll remove the hard thing for you so that you don't have to face it. At the end of the day, students need support. So even though we might give them challenges, we will say to them, hey, here are the steps we're going to take to solve this. And if it's too much, let's break it down into smaller steps. And we're not going to turn away from this work. So maybe we don't get it today, but we're going to try again tomorrow. And no matter what, we're going to stay committed to this and see it through to the end. Now, rescue though looks like, gosh, that looks like it's really frustrating you. Let's just not do this assignment at all right now. Or, you know what? Yeah, that looks really challenging. There was 10 problems. Let's just only finish 3 of them. If every single time the child sees an adult rescue them, they kind of get this message of, I guess I can't handle this. However, if the child basically gets support during challenges, what they kind of learn is that, you know what, this might be challenging, but I will find a way to work through it. Support helps the child work through the challenge, but rescue teaches the child that difficulty and challenges are optional. So as an adult, whether you're the parent or the teacher, my recommendation, students and children, they will shut down eventually. They will get frustrated eventually. It's not a matter of if, it's when. So have your strategy ready to go when it does come up. I always recommend just stay calm. Usually help them break the task into smaller steps, work through them, but still keep the expectation of we're going to work through this challenge, we are going to complete it, and it's going to be completed a certain way. Again, not the same thing as rescue where we remove the work entirely, because again, removing it entirely, removing the challenge, it's just going to weaken their confidence. It communicates to the child that, you know what, you can't really handle this. We as adults have to help the child face the work and also communicate to them that just because they become frustrated does not mean that the work or the challenge just goes away. So yes, it is true. Some tasks can overwhelm students, or the student doesn't have the skills necessary for the task at that time. But that's not what we're referring to here. We're talking about students who are capable and who could do the work, but they have learned as a strategy that shutting down helps the work go away or makes the parent or the teacher leave them alone. It kind of gets them what they want. And we can't keep reinforcing that because overcoming challenges builds a student's confidence. It builds their self-worth. It builds up how they view themselves, how they respect themselves. And we need to be there with them to support them along that journey. So not just here, there's a challenge for you and just go on and take it. We have to be there with them step by step, helping them, but not doing it for them and not just removing the challenge for them as well. Make sure that they finish it and that they commit to it. And that's what really helps grow a student, not even just with the academics, but just with their mindset and their skill set to execute and finish something that they're given. A student who doesn't just complete assignments, but students who can face difficulty, finish it, and grow from it. And if adults in those moments stay calm, give support, encouragement, and help them stay committed, you will get children who believe that they can do hard things. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And please check us out here at the Lilwell Learning Company. And until next time, take care.